Once envisioned as the world's largest airport by land area, Montreal Mirabel International Airport was meant to catapult Canada into the future of air travel. Designed to handle 60 million passengers a year, it opened with global fanfare just in time for the 1976 Olympics. But the reality unraveled fast. The airport lacked a rail link, sat nearly 40 kilometers from the city, and forced travelers to connect between two separate airports by bus. Airlines abandoned it, passengers avoided it, and entire terminals sat empty for decades. How did Canada's boldest aviation project become a billion-dollar ghost town? We need to go back to the 1960s. At the time, Montreal was booming. Expo 67 had just placed the city on the world stage. Dorval Airport, just 20 minutes from downtown, was overflowing with passengers. The federal government predicted it would reach capacity by 1985. To support future demand, officials drew up plans for a new airport, one that would replace Dorval entirely and become Canada's eastern aviation gateway. The goal? Handle 20 million passengers by 1985 and 60 million by 2000. Engineers and planners were tasked with an audacious challenge: create the world's largest, most expandable, and most forward-thinking airport, one that would carry Canada into the next century. But here's where the problems began. The site selected was in Saint-Scholastique, a full 39 kilometers from downtown Montreal. Vast farmland was expropriated, over 39,000 hectares, more than 10 times the size of today's Toronto Pearson Airport. Locals protested, engineers raised accountability concerns, but government pushed forward. And in June 1970, construction began. The scale of the project was unmatched. The airport was designed for 6 runways and 6 terminals, arranged around a central spine road. This central artery would connect all the terminals with an underground high-speed train system known as tram, capable of traveling up to 120 kilometers per hour. The runways would support up to 160 takeoffs and landings per hour. Their lengths varied from 3,048 to 4,572 meters, enough to handle everything from Concorde to the largest Boeing jets. The main terminal itself was a brutalist glass and concrete structure, a minimalist cube perched atop a massive concrete bunker. Beneath it, engineers built an underground train station for the tram line, and just above, a sleek concourse with some of the shortest passenger walks in aviation, only 100 to 200 meters from curb to gate. Now, here's the twist. Mirabel didn't use traditional jet bridges. Instead, it introduced passenger transfer vehicles, mobile lounges that would drive up to the aircraft and lift to the door. Think of it like a moving jet bridge on wheels. In theory, it would improve turnaround time and cut costs. But there was one major issue. Only 1 terminal and 2 runways were ever built. The rest of the airport, the train system, the spine road expansion, the industrial park, and 4 additional runways remained drawings on paper. By the time October 1975 rolled around, Montreal Mirabel International Airport was finally ready to open. Well, almost. Construction teams had scrambled for years to finish the first phase of the airport in time for the upcoming 1976 Summer Olympics. That deadline wasn't flexible. The world would be watching Montreal, and the government was determined to show off a brand new airport that would reflect Canada's growing international status. It had to look modern, it had to look grand, and above all, it had to be operational. But the reality was far from polished. Roads leading to the airport were still incomplete. The rail system that was supposed to connect downtown Montreal to Mirabel in under 30 minutes, not even started. A large underground train station, tram, had already been constructed beneath the terminal, but without any tracks, trains, or service, the station sat dark and empty, a massive hole in the plan. This was just one of many unfinished promises. Instead of a smooth and efficient rail connection, passengers arriving at Mirabel had to rely on buses. These weren't high-speed, dedicated shuttles, they were just standard express buses navigating narrow roads that were often clogged with traffic. Even in ideal conditions, it took over an hour to reach the downtown core. In rush hour, that could double. And this was the very first impression international travelers had of Montreal. It didn't help that the airport was built far from the city, exactly 39 kilometers from downtown. And with no train and no direct highway into the heart of Montreal, Mirabel felt remote and disconnected. This became a major engineering failure. not because the airport itself was flawed, but because the supporting infrastructure never materialized. When Mirabel launched, only international flights were moved there. Domestic and US-bound flights continued to operate from Dorval. This created a logistical nightmare for passengers trying to connect between international and domestic destinations. Let's say you were flying from Paris to Toronto. Under the new setup, your flight would land at Mirabel, but Toronto flights still departed from Dorval. That meant you had to disembark, collect your luggage, get on a bus and make a 50-kilometer trip through Montreal's traffic to catch your connecting flight. The journey between the airports could easily take 90 minutes, assuming you didn't hit delays. This problem wasn't limited to travelers. It affected airline operations too. Crew rotations, maintenance, and cargo handling became significantly more complicated with two separate airports. International carriers began questioning whether it was worth continuing service to Montreal at all. Some pulled out entirely. And this was just the beginning of a bigger collapse. Several global and local factors came together to crush demand. The 1973 oil crisis had already made air travel more expensive. Airlines started scaling back flights and cutting costs. At the same time, a new generation of long-range aircraft like the Boeing 747 and DC-10 entered service. These planes could fly non-stop between Europe and Western North America, bypassing Montreal altogether. Even worse, as the airport opened, Montreal's role as Canada's business capital was starting to fade. Due to rising political tensions and Quebec's independence movement, many corporations and residents began relocating to Toronto. As Toronto grew, it took over Montreal's position as the country's main financial and commercial hub. With less business traffic and a disjointed airport system, Montreal quickly fell out of favor. Toronto Pearson International Airport, which offered centralized connections between domestic, US, and international destinations, became the logical choice for airlines and passengers alike. Why deal with two separate airports and a frustrating connection in Montreal when Toronto offered a simpler alternative? Mirabel, meanwhile, couldn't attract enough traffic to justify its size, and Dorval, which was never supposed to remain open, suddenly found itself back in demand. The government's phased transition plan fell apart. Dorval was supposed to shut down in 1982. It never did. Instead, the city ended up with two competing airports, neither of them functioning at full capacity. The duplication of services strained airline schedules, created passenger confusion, and eroded Montreal's competitiveness as a major hub. By 1989, the government had started reversing course. Over 32,000 hectares of land, about 81% of the total area, was returned to its original owners. Farmers reclaimed their fields. The vision of a mega hub was quietly abandoned. What remained was a futuristic ghost town, a fully equipped passenger terminal with no passengers, a train station with no trains, and parking structures designed for millions that barely saw 100 cars per day. By 1991, Dorval and Mirabel combined were handling just 8 million passengers annually, less than half the original projection for Mirabel alone. Mirabel never exceeded 3 million passengers in any year of its operation. By the late 1990s, Mirabel was collapsing. In 1997, the government gave in to pressure and reopened Dorval to international flights. Airlines rushed back. Mirabel's passenger traffic declined rapidly. By 2004, only one carrier remained, Air Transat. On October 31, 2004, the final passenger flight departed to Paris. After just 29 years, Montreal Mirabel International Airport was officially abandoned. Its fate left to rot. For years, the terminal stood unused. Shops were shuttered, signs faded, weeds cracked the tarmac. It became a backdrop for Hollywood films, most famously the terminal with Tom Hanks. It was cheaper to film there than in real airports. That's how empty it had become. By 2014, Aéroport de Montréal had spent $30 million just keeping the building from falling apart. Renovations would cost another $25 million. So they made the call: demolish it. Demolition began in November 2014. It took nearly 2 years. Gone was the terminal, gone was the futuristic parking garage. What remained was a vast empty runway and an abandoned hotel. But Mirabel didn't disappear entirely. The airfield remained open for cargo and aerospace operations. Bombardier had a plant on site and continued assembling aircraft there. Airbus took over the facility to produce the A220 jet. Helicopter operations, medevac flights, and private jets started using the space. By 2019, Mirabel was reborn, not as a passenger airport, but as a business hub. It was rebranded as YMX International Aerocity of Mirabel, no longer a gateway for millions, but a quiet, functional zone for aircraft assembly and logistics. But Mirabel wasn't the only airport to collapse under the weight of ambition. Across the Atlantic, Berlin's Brandenburg Airport promised cutting-edge German efficiency. Instead, it became a global punchline, plagued by fire system failures, tangled wiring, and more than 500,000 construction defects. The airport sat empty for nearly a decade, missing 7 opening dates and draining billions in taxpayer money. Click here to watch our deep dive into the Berlin-Brandenburg disaster. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-world stories of engineering ambition.